Hi everyone, I hope you are well and healthy. So this time I will be taking a short presentation come lecture on the topic Coase Theorem, and the purpose of taking this lecture is twofold. The first one is to explain the theoretical framework behind this theorem and to give you the practical example in a way to explain the application of this theorem. So I mentioned in my previous lecture that property rights is a mere policy instrument, and the bigger picture in the frame is that of Coase Theorem. Coase Theorem was propounded by a Nobel-winning economist, Ronald Coase, and he gave various examples which is similar to what we discussed in the previous lecture in property rights. And he mentioned all his examples in his article which by the name The Problem of Social Cost, and it was published in the year 1960. So if I were to give you a statement of Coase theorem, it would be this way. The Coase theorem states that if the property rights are well assigned and well defined and there are no transaction costs in existence, so the negotiation and bargaining between the parties will lead to an efficient solution, and the efficient solution will be same irrespective of to whom the property rights are assigned. Now here in this statement we have already come across a few terminologies like property rights, bargaining, affected parties. But what we have not come across with a term is known as a transaction cost. So let's see what is a transaction cost. A transaction cost is a amount involved in reaching and implementing an agreement. It also includes the cost of obtaining information of costs and benefits. It also includes the time and effort spent in negotiations. So if you have seen our previous lecture, you could easily relate at how Jat and Punjabi spent enormous amount of time and efforts in their negotiation. They also must have incurred a cost of obtaining information of costs and benefits. Now the next part of theoretical framework is the assumption. Now Coase theorem has two main underlying assumptions. The first one is zero transaction costs. Now we just saw what transaction cost is. However, the assumption of zero transaction cost does not seem to be realistic, and the other assumption here is that the damages to the affected parties as well as to the environment are measurable and accessible. So this is how far the theoretical framework of Coase theorem goes. And now in order to see the practicality and the implementation of this theoretical framework, we need to see a particular example. Now the example is such that the issue in the example is such that there are two parties, fishermen and the industry, and there is one common environmental good which is river. Now industries are using this river to release the toxic chemicals, which is the byproduct of their production, to release into the river. And fishermen uses this river, and you see that the purpose of river for both the parties is completely opposite. So this is the main issue at hand right now, and Coase theorem gives us a way to solve this issue. Now the first phase of Coase theorem implementation is that we need to assign property rights. The first condition of implementation of Coase theorem is that the property rights need to be well assigned. So in this way forward, what we are doing is that we are assigning property rights to the industry. In this case, the property is a river, and we are assigning full rights to the industry to pollute the river by releasing their toxic chemicals. Now this may seem unacceptable at the moment, but remember the point that no matter to whom property rights are assigned, the efficient solution which we will be achieving at the end will be same anyhow. The next point to note is that we are in a free market system right now, and any production house, any industrial unit will produce till the point it maximizes its profit. And with the production of goods, it is definitely releasing a byproduct, which is the pollution into the river. Now this pollution in a way is negatively affecting fishermen in a more economic terms, that their utility out of the river is falling. Now when fishermen are negatively impacted, they have an incentive to negotiate with the industry. So now we come to the second phase of the Coase Theorem implementation framework, which is the negotiation. Now when fishermen approaches to industry, they will be willing to pay to the industry to not to pollute up to an amount which is equivalent to the associated loss of their utility out of the river. On the other hand, industries will be willing to accept any amount of compensation to not to pollute the river, as long as that amount is more than the loss in profit which they are incurring by cutting down their production. Now let's see the negotiation process between industry and fishermen in detail. On the right hand side you can see a graph. The x-axis tells us the quantity of output which the industry is producing, and the y-axis tells you the price per unit of the output. Now let's focus upon QC. It is a point at which the marginal private benefit is equal to marginal private cost. It is also the point which we also call it as profit maximizing point, and it is a point at which the industry is producing at the moment. Another point which we need to note in this graph is QE associated with the point in W. At this point we see that marginal private benefit is equal to marginal social cost. Now here we see that there are two types of costs in the same graph. The first one is marginal private cost and the second marginal social cost. The difference between marginal private cost and marginal social cost comes with marginal external cost. Now this marginal external cost is nothing but the environmental damage which the industry has done by releasing toxic chemicals to the river, and the loss in utility therefore faced by the fishermen. Now graphically we can see that marginal external cost is a difference between marginal social cost and marginal private cost. At QC, marginal external cost is nothing but the difference between X and Y. Another terminology which is not explicitly mentioned in the graph is something known as marginal profit. Now marginal profit is a difference between marginal private cost and marginal private benefit. So at QC, marginal profit is 0, and at QE, marginal profit is the difference between Y and Z. Now when fishermen approaches industry for the purpose of negotiation, we need to see at what point they start their negotiation process, and this point can be easily identified with the help of graph. Now I say that QC is the point at which fishermen will start negotiating with the industry. Now why QC is the beginning point of negotiation? It is so because at QC we can easily see that marginal external cost is way more than marginal profit. So fishermen have a clear incentive to start their negotiation here. Now when the negotiation process starts, but we see that in theory the fishermen will be willing to pay till the point that the amount of compensation is less than or equivalent to their marginal external cost, and the industry will be willing to accept any amount of compensation which is more than the loss in profit they will be incurring by cutting back their production. In other words, we can say that the negotiation process will continue to be so as long as the marginal external cost which fishermen are incurring is more than the marginal profit which industries are earning. And the negotiation process is ought to end when the marginal external cost is equivalent to the marginal profit. So in this way we get a range of bargaining. The range of bargaining is from QC to QE. Why the range of bargaining ends at QE? Because at QE we see that the marginal external cost, which is the difference between W and Z, is equivalent to marginal profit, which is again the difference between W and Z. Now if we move beyond QE, that is if we go left to the QE, we see that the marginal profit is more than marginal external cost. That means that fishermen will no longer be able to compensate the loss in profit incurred by the industry beyond the point QE. So theoretically and practically the negotiation ends at point QE, and that is why we say that this point is an efficient level of output, that the level of pollution emissions into the river is as minimum as possible, making sure that we keep running the wheel of economic activity. Now this was the case when property rights are assigned to industry. Now let's see when property rights are assigned to fishermen. Now in this case, as I mentioned earlier, that the conclusion, the result which we will achieve will be similar to that we achieved just now, which is that we will end up at point QE, which is the efficient level of production. However, the starting point of negotiation and the range of bargaining will be very different. The starting point of negotiation, for a hint's sake, will be when output is equal to 0, and the range of bargaining will continue till the point QE. This is the Coase theorem theoretically and application wise. I tried to be as concise as I could. I tried to explain as many concepts and as in detail as I could. In case I have made any mistake in my explanation, do let me know in the feedback, and best of luck. Thank you.